I'm Barbara Lawson from the Visiting Meaningful Connection and Anne's Law project, and I'm joined today with Anuj, who's from the CAPA team, who's going to be supporting us with the interaction section, and my co-presenter and colleague on the Visiting Anne's Law Meaningful Connection project is Sherry Kerr, and we're really warm welcome to everybody here. Okay, folks, so let's just make a start. So what we will cover today, so got a kind of wide range of things focusing on family inclusion and why family inclusion. So what does the research tell us? Also, they are going to have input from a family carer, and we've got Catherine with us today, so we'll look forward to hearing from Catherine. Also looking at some strategies for inclusion and considering the barriers and challenges, and as in all the webinars that we've been doing, helping you focus and reflect on what we can try back at home. So what do we mean by the term family carers? We think it's important to clarify this at the start, as there are different terms used in the literature and by individuals, and people have different preferences for what they want to be called. But we are using the term here to mean immediate and extended family, friends, and other close contacts who play ongoing roles in the lives of people who live in care homes. We know that this is a big subject and everyone's situation is different, and this session cannot cover everything. We also want to acknowledge the expertise here among us on the call in terms of how to involve family carers. And some of you will have experience as being a family carer, and we know many also still may have a loved one in a care home and have had that experience as well. So there are opportunities later in the webinar to share some of your knowledge and your ideas. So our project focuses on care homes, and that is the main focus of this session. But a lot of what we discuss is also relevant to other care settings. So again, you're all warmly welcomed to today's session, and Sherry will take us over some information about the project.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for taking time out of your day to come along today. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. So just to give a brief background to our project. It was set up to support and promote the importance of all types of meaningful connection for people who live in care homes, as well as to help prepare the sector for the future implementation of Anne's Law. For anybody who maybe doesn't know that much about it and wants to know a bit more about what Anne's Law is and the current situation, we have put together a basic fact sheet about that, and we'll send that out in a follow-up email. In brief, and probably most people do know this, but just in case anyone doesn't, it's forthcoming legislation which has resulted from campaigning by relatives who were separated from their loved ones for long periods during the pandemic. And of course, we can't underestimate how difficult and traumatic that was for people and the impacts that that had on people's well-being. The aim of Anne's Law is to strengthen people's rights to have contact with those who are important to them, even during an infectious disease outbreak. And while it's not yet in legislation, it's being brought forward as part of the National Care Service Bill. And in the meantime, there are 2 new health and social care standards which have been introduced to support people to stay connected, even if restrictions are needed at any time. The right to have visitors is obviously really important. However, we also realise that the project is about much more than just visiting, hence why we're focusing on meaningful connection as a whole. It's not only about getting people into care homes, but making sure that the time people spend together is important and meaningful and really supports people getting the best out of life. As one member of staff said, you've got to try and make every time better than the last. So moving on to, if you did scan the QR code, then hopefully you've now got a page up on your phone where you can type in 1 or 2 words about what family means to you, whether that's good or bad. And over to you, Anuj, to talk us through this one.
Yeah, please do. So you've got few opportunities to submit your responses, and you can submit multiple times. So let's just hear from you as to what does family actually mean to you for you. If you hadn't scanned the QR code earlier, I've also put it in the chat just now as well, so you can scan it from the chat. We're seeing lots of really nice examples coming through already. So support is coming across. Support, safety, love is coming across quite strongly. Everything, which is kind of really interesting to see, because yeah, family, for some people, family can mean everything. It's the greatest sense of support and comfort for a lot of us, and our safety net. Support and love seem to be the most common responses. And I like word clouds for that, because the responses that are repeated get bigger and bigger, so we can see what most folk are thinking and feeling. Quite a few responses. People have mentioned connections. People have mentioned knowledge. Love and loving relationships, affection, history. People are talking about their history and their memories. Memories they've created with family. It being a safe place and a caring place. My world. So some very, very interesting responses. Traditions. So yeah, we take a lot of our traditions and our culture and almost our moral compass from our family, don't we? So, and that's coming across quite well and quite strongly here. Strength as well. So, and familiarity. So I'll hand over to Barbara to kind of further continue this discussion around family.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anuj, and lots of really, positive and some maybe not so positive. Family can mean different things to everybody, but really lovely to see those strengths of relationships there, the love and the support. So, why family inclusion? So, what do we mean by family inclusion? It's when family carers are supported to work in partnership with the care home in an atmosphere of trust and collaboration. Many family carers carry out a variety of roles which go beyond just being a visitor and are hugely important to people's health and well-being outcomes, and campaigners have fought to have their essential roles recognised. So enabling people to maintain their important relationships is also key to their human rights. Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights sets out the right to respect for private and family life, which includes supporting people to maintain their important relationships. The UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities also sets out standards about participation and inclusion, and the obligation to provide extra support when people have impairments that affect their abilities. The health and social care standards set out expectations that people experiencing care will be supported to maintain their important relationships in the ways that suit them best, and that people's representatives will be included in decision making as appropriate. Family carers have been described as guardians of the identity and dignity of their loved ones. I love that quote. So, guardians of the identity and dignity of their loved ones. And this reflects their vital role as the people who know their loved ones best in supporting their personhood and identity. And at the heart of person-centered care are meaningful relationships where there is mutual trust and connection between the person experiencing care, their loved ones, and those supporting them. So this is when we are considering that all communication and contact with others, whether this is with a family carer, a visiting professional, or anyone else, that we should be looking to have relationship-centered care where all relationships matter, and when fostered in authenticity and trust, this helps to provide continuity for people and also creates a culture that is open and honest and welcoming, and where everyone feels safe within these relationships. Okay, so Sherry's going to take us through what research tells us about family inclusion.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Barbara. Yeah, what does the research tell us about family involvements? Positive family involvement is associated with better physical, mental and emotional health and well-being outcomes for people. Rates of loneliness are known to be very high among people in care homes, particularly older people, and regular face-to-face contact with family members helps people to feel more socially connected and less lonely. When people are cut off from their loved ones, the impacts on their health and well-being can be devastating, as we've all seen. Family carers provide social and emotional support to their loved ones. They support personhood and identity by providing a link to life prior to and outside of living in the care home. It's a quote from the wife of a resident in an older people's care home. "I play music, our favourite tunes, and it brings back memories that we shared. I help him with his lunch. I do believe it's meaningful. It's a thread of his life that's maintained." It's just really reinforcing that importance to personhood and identity. Family carers can act as advocates, being an intermediary with staff when that's needed to raise any concerns or wishes that their relative may have. They provide important information about their loved one's life story, interests and preferences, etc., which helps to support person-centred care, particularly when people aren't able to provide that for themselves. Being able to visit regularly helps families to have confidence in their loved one's quality of care and enables them to raise any concerns that they may have. That's also important if family carers feel that the standards of care aren't consistent, or if there are regular changes in the staff team, for instance, or if they don't feel well informed. Family carers can often also be the ones who notice those small changes in people. Although many staff are very perceptive and know people really well and are in a good position to notice things, family carers, as the people that have known people the longest, may pick up on those small nuances that can indicate that something is changing, for example, in their mental or physical health or their cognitive functioning. Some family carers do choose to provide direct care, such as support with eating or personal care. And again, research has shown that often this is associated with better outcomes for people, such as better nutritional intake. And that's actually been recognised in the new health and social care standards, which specify that where people who experience care and their family carers want them to be involved in providing direct day-to-day care and support, that should be supported by the care home. That isn't appropriate for everybody, but it should be supported when that's what people want, and we will discuss this a bit further later in the webinar. Some family carers, of course, also contribute a lot to the life of the care home as a whole, such as being involved in supporting activities inside and outside the care home, fundraising, volunteering. Sometimes this involvement even extends beyond their relative being there. Some people have continued to visit other residents even after their own relative has passed away, continuing to be a part of the care home community. Over to you, Barbara.
Okay, so we recently visited a cross-section of services to talk to people experiencing care, their families and staff about what's important to them and what works well in relation to connection. And we wanted to hear from people about what made visiting meaningful. And here are a few quotes from people. I'm going to read some of them out because we've just highlighted some key sections onto the screen, but we'll read these in full. It just helps to bring a kind of depth of meaning. So a relative had said, "When I leave here, I know that they're looking after Dad. Staff greet you with a smile and they greet you by name. And they ask how you are, and they know all the family." The wife of a resident said, "I always feel welcome. Everyone always says that whenever I feel I want to phone or come in or be with them, don't hesitate. Whenever you feel like coming in, feel free. And the fact that you build up relationships with the staff in a very short space of time, you get to know them, and they always seem genuinely glad to see you and to show that they enjoy my husband being here. They show they care about him. They're always offering cups of tea, sometimes bring me soup when they bring his soup. They are really welcoming and thoughtful in every way. It's a very welcoming atmosphere. It's like a family, really." One deputy manager said to us, "We care together with the family. We don't care alone. It's together with the family because they're the experts. They know best. Another relative said, I have a good rapport with them. Any little issues I can tell them. One manager told us, we encourage people to come and they can have a meal. We'll say to people, you know, pop in and have your tea one night with your mum or your granny. And that can be nice for people who maybe struggle a wee bit to communicate. If they're sitting, having a meal together, makes it a wee bit more natural and sort of say to people, you know, this is your home. This is your house. So if you would normally have your granddaughter over for tea on a Friday, why don't you still do that? Have them over and we'll make the tea. Another carer said, sometimes when new residents come in, people are afraid they're interrupting meals. They're surprised if we invite them to stay for lunch, but people are welcome to come in at any time. Okay, Sherry will take us through some of the legal aspects.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Just a very quick gallop through, quick overview of some of the legal issues around family involvements. Representatives can be formal or informal. If people have legal powers, welfare guardianship or welfare power of attorney, to make decisions and receive information on their relatives' behalf, these need to be clearly documented in the person's notes. Any decisions made by someone's legal representative on their behalf must, under the Adults with Incapacity Act, be of benefit to the person, be the least restrictive option, take account of their past and present wishes, consult with others as relevant, and encourage the person to use and develop their skills to make their own decisions as far as possible. If the person experiencing care has capacity, services must ensure they have their consent to share information and involve family carers in decisions about them, and must ensure that this is also documented. Of course, complex situations do sometimes arise regarding these issues, particularly when there are concerns about capacity and there are no legal powers in place. The Mental Welfare Commission has useful resources and can also provide advice and guidance about this, as can social work services, and a referral can also be made to the social work departments if needed.
Okay, so we're going to have a look, Anuj, the next aha slide. So what do you do to include family carers already? So obviously we're recognising the wealth of the experience in the room. So you should be able to just type in a couple of words, a short sentence, to bring in all your ideas. So, and we'll start reading them out. Yep, joining in on activities.
There's lots coming up now. Brilliant. Yeah, because we know so much fantastic work goes on in the community at the moment, you know, already within various services. Meetings, events, fundraising activities, birthdays and anniversary parties, relatives meetings, WhatsApp groups, you know, that become quite essential, especially through the pandemic when, you know, we weren't having as many visits. So it was so good to kind of be able to share photographs, videos, and chats about what we've all been up to. Providing lots of space and environments for families to use when visiting, so they've got an appropriate place and a space. Community groups, including, you know, activities, inclusion in activities and fundraising comes a lot. Facebook page, yeah, making appropriate use of social media to share all the good news stories and all the great work that's happening across in various services. A relative ambassador, that sounds very interesting. Appropriate involvement in care planning. We're getting some things in the charts as well about joining in on meal times, regular face-to-face and over the phone contacts, and inviting them to family members to come along to things that are going on. Helping with the rules in the home, brilliant. Yeah, some really good things. Discussions on food and food preferences for folk. Having monthly meetings with the relatives. Great, lots of really interesting things coming across. Organizing private meal times, that's a really good one, you know, so like the opportunity, providing the right opportunity for the along with the wishes of the client and the relatives. Are you able to scroll a bit, Barbara, to see if there's anything else we can kind of pick up on? I think you can click the arrow at the bottom where it says page 1 of 3.
Yeah, that's what I've done, but it doesn't seem to be.
It
That's
is really
but
glitchy today, isn't it?
yeah,
It's just that day for Teams. It
Yeah.
has those days.
oh yeah, got
Um,
it. Your text box was in the way. Got you now. Here we are.
There we go. Informing families about menu changes. As an IPC nurse, promoting hydration and well-being for residents and staff with the families. Encouraging visitors of all ages. See if they can support some activities. Encourage them to undertake participation in various activities. Inviting families to Christmas dinners. That's cute. Having a suggestion box, yeah, to see how family can contribute into day-to-day life and the working of the service. Updating families of changes within the organizations, getting to know them better, absolutely. Are you setting up lovely tables in a private area for meal to have together? That came out earlier as well, and going on trips out together. Brilliant. Yeah, lots of really good examples. Although I'm surprised nobody's mentioned Boogie in the Bar yet, because I don't know whether you guys are different, because we used to always invite families at Boogie in the Bar because it was a cracking way of getting family involved in a much larger event where we could mingle and they could mingle and mingle with other families as well.
Yep, brilliant.
I'm going to have to mention this one. This is a really nice one. We organize cinema nights where residents can have exclusive use of the cinema and have an evening or matinee with their family, grandchildren or family. I think that's quite lovely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's great.
So all some brilliant examples there. And see where we're at. So it's on to me, making visiting meaningful. Okay, so here we want to highlight some of the key themes that were important to people, which have emerged from our visits to the care homes. Again, some of the things that you've already highlighted, which is brilliant. So people feel welcome at any time. They are able to access the building easily. A lot of people really valued being given the entry code so they didn't have to wait for somebody to let them in. One home manager said, "We try to be really inclusive. We don't expect people to buzz to get in. They know the codes. They take us as they find us." We found this was different in every service, however, and on occasion some people did have to wait considerable time to gain access to the building. People also really appreciated when they were welcome to stay for a meal and share a meal time with their relative, and it was good to see a lot of that's already happening in services. People were also informed about the layout of the building. So where can they go to get a cup of tea or coffee? Where are the toilets? How can they use the outside space? Any relevant service-specific information that people might need to know, like when the fire alarm is being tested. A lot of people whose relative moved in during the pandemic, they are perhaps not as familiar with how things worked in the care home prior to that, as they'd only experienced visits being restricted, and that they hadn't benefited from that initial show round or initial discussion when choosing the home. So people really appreciated about being given specific information. And we found that during our visits, some managers took that on board and were contacting people that had come in during the pandemic to offer them that initial show round and have those discussions. So people also appreciated having a range of options of where to spend their time when they visit. Obviously, this was something that was not available for a long time during the pandemic. For instance, one lady with dementia who likes to spend most of her time walking around the home in the garden. So when her daughter visits, she walks with her. Sometimes they sit in the lounge or the garden or in her room. While some people prefer to have the privacy of a visit in their room, visiting shouldn't be confined to bedrooms if that is not what people want. We did find that some services were still reluctant to have different family groups in the lounge together. People also told us that they highly valued and appreciated staff who are friendly, approachable and accessible, and who know the resident and the family well. As we quoted earlier, the wife of one resident said about the staff in her husband's care home that they always seem genuinely glad to see you, and that they enjoy my husband being here. They show they care about him. People also appreciate when they feel able to raise questions and concerns or issues that they have, and that they feel confident that these will be addressed. As one person said, you don't feel like you're being a nuisance. It never feels like you're interfering by saying, can you double check this? Okay, so Sherry will take us on to some strategies for inclusion.
Right. I think we've got Catherine back now, Barbara.
Okay,
so hopefully
perfect.
we can have that section.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to introduce Catherine Fletcher. So Catherine has experience both as a family carer and as an inspection volunteer, but she's here today in her capacity as a family carer. So thank you for being with us, Catherine.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you brilliantly. Hopefully that will continue. So can you give us a quick background of your own experience, please, as a family carer?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I trained as a nurse many years ago, and so that gave me the confidence to look after both my parents as they declined in their general health, and both lived with vascular dementia. So I looked after mum and dad for many years, and then helped mum with her transition into full-time care in a care home. And mum moved in to a care in January 2019, obviously the year before the lockdown and the pandemic. And what we appreciated in care homes was when people gave you a friendly smile and treated the place not as a clinical setting, but as mum's new home, along with all the other people's whose home it was. And I think it was very important when you were greeted with a smile, and as the months went on, people would get to know your name, get to know your relative well, and you felt had trust in the carers. So yeah, really important that the carers take time to greet relatives when they come in. But I do appreciate what a very busy and at times tricky job a caring is, and how you may not feel you have the time to stop and speak, but as a relative coming in to see an unhurried place is really important, so you don't feel in the way or worried in any way that your relative isn't getting enough care because it appears too busy.
Yeah, so just picking up on those things that Barbara was just mentioning, I suppose, about feeling welcome. So from your points of view, what other sorts of things can help to make sure that people's families and friends are included?
Before the pandemic, regular relatives meetings were crucial, we all felt, in being able to get together with the staff and management in a comfortable setting with a cup of tea and a piece of cake, and really discuss what was on the agenda, but also any other points of interest or anything that was worrying you in an open and transparent setting. That was really, really important. And then for all the minutes to be disseminated to all the relatives. And then any issues you had, you felt they were acted upon, listened to and acted upon, and to actually have it in writing, things that were discussed, so that if things didn't get better in a particular way, or something didn't happen as was promised, you almost had something to refer back to. And I think that was quite important. And after the pandemic, these face-to-face meetings never really happened again. And my mum sadly died last summer. But I hope that relatives meetings do continue in most settings now, because I felt it's really important.
Yeah. So you kind of experienced before, during, and a bit after the pandemic as well. So what was that like? What were some of the issues there?
January 19, mum moved in, and so that's what we experienced. Almost over a year of normal living, as it were, and then I would visit mum every day, and moving into care was really a partnership of care with the care staff. It wasn't handing over anything. It was a partnership of care, and that worked. And but then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, as you all know, visiting was just stopped, and it was so severe and traumatic, but for all the family and for the staff, I'm sure, and most importantly for the residents, who some may not understand what was going on and why we weren't coming in as regularly as we did. So it was very traumatic, and that lack of contact, that lack of touch and holding hands was traumatic, for very emotional, and for the staff. We did try with iPads and mobile phones, but a lot of the time it felt a bit rushed, and an iPad may be positioned against something but my mum, for example, found it quite difficult to focus on the iPad and still couldn't quite get that I wasn't in the room, even though I was speaking and she could hear me. And then when the staff did leave to give us privacy, the iPad might fall over because mum will have knocked the table. And so we spent half an hour sort of talking at a very odd angle, and it was almost worse than not having a contact. I don't know how you can improve that, really. Maybe just ensuring that nothing could fall over, that the iPad couldn't fall over. But as visiting was brought in again very, very slowly with PPE and gloves and masks, still the connection and the ability to communicate meaningfully was really very hard, and I feel so sorry for the residents who are hard of hearing or just couldn't see who was behind the mask, and for many, many months it was very difficult. But one thing I found quite hard was when we were allowed back in the room, still without touching or holding hands, that the doors had to be kept open. And I don't think that was written in law. I just think each care home interpreted things in their own way, but I felt that was too harsh, and there was no privacy to have a conversation or to be emotional because the door was kept open, so there's no privacy. But gradually things relaxed. Gradually we were allowed to hold hands, and that was just wonderful again to have that connection. And then finally visiting, we didn't have to wear PPE. Finally things got back to normal, and it was such a relief to see everyone's faces again.
Yeah, I think that was such a huge thing for people, wasn't it? And sort of not being able to touch and having, you know, all the PPE and everything. So, I mean, apart from obviously the pandemic and everything that happened there, have you experienced any other sort of obstacles or barriers that inhibits kind of having those collaborative relationships with staff? Was there anything that springs to mind?
But I think most staff do a really good job, and I just think if each person's care plan was really individual and it wasn't necessarily a tick box exercise, if people really thought about who is moving in, who's their family, what are their likes and dislikes, really made it individual, and it was accessible to relatives to look at an update and just to check if everything's correct. That's a start, because with new staff coming or agency staff, it's impossible for them to know much about who they're looking after for a day or two. But if there was an accessible, easily read care plan that just gave a good overview of who that person is, so that would really help. And I think with activities, it's really important, as somebody mentioned earlier, that to make each day as lovely as possible. And I think that's really important to remember, that this care home, wherever they're living, is their last move. That's their last home. And it is important to the appearance and cleanliness it is seen to, but really it's important that there is some meaningful activity time going on every day, and that should be the main focus of a care home, is to make life meaningful, not task orientated, task driven. It's not a clinical setting, really. It's home. And I think to make something lovely happen each day and to not be hurried. Nothing should really be rushed because the residents, that's their home. So just remember, I think if we work together, relatives and staff, to make it a peaceful, comfortable place to live, and for people to take time and not be rushed. And I appreciate with bells ringing, staff are very busy. I think we all do appreciate and thank staff for all they do, especially during the pandemic. But I think we really need to work together with relatives. Some people don't want to be that involved, but for those relatives who really want to be included, use us, and really let us help with making life really good for people. And yeah, meaningful times, meaningful cups of tea, just have a chat and hold hands, because that's what do we all want. We like to have chats with people and take time and have a cup of tea.
Yeah. Absolutely. No.
I think, yeah, transparency is really important as well, for us to be able to feel we can say anything, not feeling that we're rocking the boat. You know, sometimes the boat has to be nudged a bit to sail through calmer waters again. And I think, as my job as an inspection volunteer, you do hear that phrase, we don't want to rock the boat, we don't want to say anything. And I think that's really sad, and we need to change that. For people need transparency. They need to feel that their worries or anxieties will be addressed, and let's work together to improve whatever the problem is. We should be all on the same side to make residents' life as good as possible and as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can all agree on that. That's what we're all after, isn't it? Just trying to help people get the best out of life. Thank you very much, Catherine. Is there anything else that you think might be relevant, or anything that you think is particularly important to mention?
I think you mentioned guardians of identity earlier, and I do love that saying as well. We are the family. We are the ones who have the right to say we are family, and we want to approach the staff as the professional. So they are separate. Staff are the professionals, the relatives, the visitor are the family, but we need to work together for the same outcome, to have a lovely end of your life, how many years people have in care homes. Let's make it special together.
Yeah, definitely, and beautifully expressed. Thank you very much, Catherine, for sharing your experiences. That's been great, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'm glad it works in the end. Thank you.
And there's some lovely comments in the chat as well, Catherine, if you're able to go in and have a look. So Sherry's now going to take us through some strategies for inclusion. So I'll get to the right bit. And here we go. So over to you, Sherry.
Right, thanks, Barbara. Yeah, so picking up probably on quite a few things that Catherine actually mentioned there. This next section is going to be looking further at some areas which have been found to be helpful from talking to people and from the research, and not all of them will be relevant to everybody, and most of it will be familiar and people will already be doing, but we really just wanted to highlight the key elements that have emerged through research and through talking to people and consulting with people. So family inclusion is fostered by a really person-centered and relationship-centered approach, which takes into account the personal circumstances, views and preferences of family carers. When issues do arise, it's often as a result of miscommunication. It's really easy for both sides, families and staff, to misinterpret each other's communication and what it means, and that can often result in conflicts between families and staff, and ultimately in complaints to the care home or to the care inspectorates. A very high proportion of complaints do come down to communication that for whatever reason has not worked out. Family carers might be experiencing grief and loss, sadness, anxiety, guilt, denial, a whole range of possible emotions which could impact on how they communicate and how they perceive what's being said to them. And That's likely to affect anybody whose loved one has moved into a care home, particularly in the early days, or if things are changing for the person, such as if there's been a change in their health. In the case of dementia, for instance, the journey is different for everyone, and so the long trajectory, the individual nature of the condition, that can be extremely difficult for everybody involved when they're facing constant losses. Sometimes can be daily losses and changes in their loved one's condition. But I think anybody whose loved one has moved into a care home is likely to have, or to have had to deal with, some difficult emotions. And obviously people handle that in different ways. So it's important to consider what emotions people might be experiencing, where they are on their journey, how that might be manifested in communication that sometimes might not necessarily seem helpful. Good relationships are really fostered when there are those open, respectful and positive interactions, when people are clear about what they can and can't expect from the care home. And staff can also provide information and guidance or signposting to other sources of support when needed. Communication that's clear, open, jargon-free and transparent is highly valued by family carers and really helps to build trust and collaboration. It's very easy to slip into jargon or use terms which people might not fully understand without necessarily realizing you're doing it. We've probably all done this at times, or assume that people have knowledge, such as medical terminology, for instance, that they maybe don't have. And again, that can lead to damaging miscommunication. Ensuring that people are included at all stages of assessments, care planning, reviews, decision making, when that's what people want and when they have the right to be involved. Family carers might not feel able to raise points due to where they are in their own journey. So checking in with people regularly is important, making sure that people know that it's okay and that they matter and their input is wanted. And as mentioned, people really value staff who take the time to get to know the residents and find out the little things that make a difference. So making sure that people are really enabled, empowered and welcomed to ask questions and to raise issues and concerns, and that they're taken seriously and addressed and documented. It sounds obvious, but sometimes for whatever reason that doesn't always happen. There should be a clear procedure that everyone knows about for raising concerns and complaints, formally and informally. People are reassured that staff want them to share any concerns and they don't fear that there'll be a negative effects on them or their relatives as a result. People are not worried about rocking the boat, as we said earlier. For some family carers, contact with care home staff and others in the home might be the only contact with other people that they have on a day-to-day basis. And people can be very anxious about damaging those relationships by seeming critical and so be reluctant to raise concerns. And that can sometimes result in situations escalating when they could have been resolved at a much earlier stage. Okay, so just continuing on from that, important that there's a culture within the service where people's input and involvement really is sought and welcomed. That can be through formal mechanisms like relatives meetings, as Catherine mentions, questionnaires and so on, but also informally on a day-to-day basis. A lot of services now are making really good use of technology to involve people, which obviously became much more important during the pandemic, but has often continued at a higher level than it was previously. For instance, enabling relatives to join meetings remotely if they can't be there in person, and using email and social media more effectively to keep people in touch and gather their views. And I know some people really appreciate having that kind of social media contact to be able to see what's going on when maybe they can't visit regularly. When people are welcomed and encouraged to participate in activities and trips and so on, that helps people to be included. It builds a sense of being part of the care home community, helps to get to know staff and other residents better, as well as helping to support the activity. For instance, I think somebody mentioned earlier, inviting families in for a movie afternoon or night, or for breakfast or supper at a weekend, or if family carers have particular interests or skills, they could perhaps come in to share their knowledge. For instance, some have run art classes or exercise classes. Not everybody is of course, going to have the time or the inclination to get involved, but we did find that people really valued having that opportunity. Some families and friends have also appreciated having opportunities to meet and support each other. For example, some people have really benefited from belonging to a relative support group, which was initially started by the care home, but subsequently went on to be organised by relatives who would meet at the care home on a monthly basis to talk and support each other. And people found that to be a really good source of support, to be able to talk to and get to know others with similar experiences. So I suppose just summing all that up, kind of an organisational culture which values and welcomes inclusion and collaboration. And, you know, that also includes having policies and procedures, including staff training, which really support and recognise the importance of family involvement. So maybe where staff roles and responsibilities explicitly include an understanding of families as equal partners, creating mutual respect and acknowledging each other's contributions, where staff get to know people's families and friends and build that rapport with them, you know, and that's expected of all staff as a core part of their job. And we'll discuss a bit more about organisational culture, I think, on the next slide. Back to you, Barbara.
Okay, great. So lots of different things to think about. So we've already touched on some of the potential barriers and challenges, but we'll focus on these in a bit more detail. And this is really the last slide with content, and then we'll be moving on to some other interactive sessions. And I can see lots of things happening in the chat, so I'm looking forward to having a good look at that. So organizational culture and values can be an obstacle when some families express feelings that their knowledge and contributions are not wanted, valued, or respected. Some people can feel reluctant to raise concerns, as we've said, for fear that they may be viewed as troublemakers and that they have a perception that their relatives' care might be adversely affected. While this may not actually be the case, it's important that people have clear information about how to raise a concern and that they have reassurance that these are welcomed and that there will not be any negative consequences. So giving people regular opportunities to receive and gather feedback can be important. Conflict can also arise in relationships with some staff members. We discussed earlier about acknowledging emotions and trying to avoid miscommunication, making sure everyone is on the same page. Once a lack of trust develops, it can easily become a vicious circle and can be difficult to remedy. Encouraging staff to chat to people as they walk by. So that was something Catherine pointed out, that welcoming smile. It helps to kind of build rapport, just saying hello, even if you've already spoken to them during the visit, keeping the communication open and friendly. Learning and teaching staff how to ask clarifying questions can really help to ensure people are understanding what is being communicated in a conversation. Lack of open communication is a very common source of complaints, which Sherry pointed out. And as one daughter said, I prefer them not to cover it up. I would say to staff that if my mum's been shouting or hitting people, let me know. Don't just say she's fine. Miscommunication and understanding is also a common theme from complaints, as we highlighted earlier. It can be important to establish the level of information that people want, as again, this can be an individual thing. So establishing the sorts of things that people want to be informed about and when, although obviously significant events like an accident or a serious incident should always be reported. Having clear understanding that people know how to pass things on. A family carer may tell something to a care worker or staff member, but then that isn't always passed up the chain or passed on at the report. And something as simple as mum likes her pajamas tucked into her bed socks, or she likes to have a hanky in her pajama pocket, or his hair is parted in a certain way. And these can seem like extremely small things, but can be frequently upsetting if they persist and build up over time and can lead to a lack of trust and reduced confidence that may give the impression that people don't care. So being responsive to change and recognising and considering things from other people's perspectives is really important. Also consider within your staffing methods how key workers or senior staff and management and leaders in the service or the chef or whoever can also check in with people. And if people visit at certain times, try to pop in and say hello. We realise that this can be difficult and there's so many competing demands, but keeping relationships at the centre and working to establish this culture of inclusion can ultimately make the care home a better place for everyone and save time in the long run. Speak to people what's working well or what needs improved. Work together collaboratively and help to build trust. Keep people informed of what's happening in the home. Other factors that can inhibit family inclusion could be geography or the accessibility of the care home, for instance. Some services might be inaccessible by public transport. So how can people work together to address this to be more inclusive? Some services make the care home more accessible by sharing the entry code with people, others don't. But how can this be considered through risk assessment to enable people while keeping people safe? Also, depending on the location of the home, some family carers may struggle to visit due to transport issues or mobility issues. One service we visited, which was very remote, ran a minibus to collect people from the town centre, from the main bus centre at the local town. And while there were additional costs, this had ultimately increased their occupancy and meant they could work to support admissions from out with the local area. While this is not feasible for everyone, it may be worth speaking to other managers or discussing it at forums or considering using volunteers or organisations. Personal circumstances of family carers can also change, and people may experience health challenges or have family or work commitments. Family conflicts can also be barriers to including people. Thinking of flexible ways of responding to circumstances is not always easy, but can be important to ask people if there's anything that would help to support them. As we mentioned earlier about grief and loss, the family carer may be having difficulties in their relationship with their relative. Maybe their dementia is progressing and the additional grief and loss is being experienced, where the relative is perceived as being unresponsive or difficult to communicate with. This is emotionally upsetting and difficult for families and can also make people less inclined to visit or not have a good experience during the visit, which can cause additional strain on them and affect how they may communicate or be perceived by staff. Again, signposting people to sources of information and support from staff with other families or external professionals or support groups. Giving people opportunity to chat things through and speak about what may be happening or what's changing. So considering, are there dementia ambassadors or champions in the home? There's also a resource called Come On In, where this can help give people ideas on how to make a visit more meaningful if they are finding it difficult to know how to spend time together. Keeping up to date with guidance in the event of an outbreak and ensuring everyone knows what they can do in terms of visiting and that people's choice of named visitors are clearly recorded, and that families understand how essential visiting will operate and how they can be supported to remain in contact even in the event of a crisis. So just to summarise, we appreciate the sector is struggling in many ways, but despite the increasing pressures during our visits to the care homes, we have witnessed some really lovely examples of good practice and people's values in action. We acknowledge that they're often not easy answers, but highlighting the potential barriers and using a problem-solving approach collaboratively may help. We want to encourage everyone to build on what's working well and celebrate where practice and values are creating a culture for connection, and where all relationships matter and that people experience the best outcomes possible. Much of what we have shared does not cost money, but it is about building on values and acknowledging people's rights and establishing a safe place where people who may feel vulnerable due to their experiences of grief and loss are able to feel supported and welcomed through open relationships and relationship-centered communication, which recognises everyone is important and that family carers can be true partners in care. We have developed a self-evaluation tool around meaningful connection, which can be used to help you reflect on what's working well and how you may develop your service to have a culture of connections, and we'll be sharing that shortly. So just to finish, we're going to have a very quick whistle-stop tour on what some things that you might do it back at your work. So using the AHA slides, and then Sherry will just finish off. And then if there's any particular questions in the chat, we've run out of time, but we will make a point of going into them, and we will follow this up with an email and share your contributions. Okay, so Anuj.
Yeah,
what
let's
might-
hear from you.
Yeah.
One thing might you try back at work? So you've heard of a lot of ideas. We've talked about a lot of barriers and how to overcome them. So practically, what are you going to take away from today? What one thing might you try different at work? And that could be looking at ways of involving the families more in the day-to-day care delivery, day-to-day plans, activities. Or that may be, even simply returning to the good practice you used to have before, like doing more regular relatives meetings and, that you used to have pre-pandemic. So yeah, there's already a few ideas coming up, starting a relative support group. Yeah, I agree. The relative ambassador idea does sound really good. Involving families in the service development plans. Good. Organize the next relatives meeting. I like that. Nice, simple, practical, straight away. Yeah. Getting into routine with doing quarterly family meetings, training the relatives to carry out activities or in care. Absolutely. Yeah. Make them an asset. Help contribute to the day-to-day life in the care home. Use their skills. Absolutely. Inviting family members to mealtimes again, yeah, because we used to be really good at that pre-pandemic, and then that kind of almost, everything we thought was good care kind of got put on hold through the pandemic. So it's really good to see all of those things that we used to do that were great are coming back again. Just simple ideas around, because mealtime forms such a crucial part of our daily life for the resident, and reminds us what being a family used to be like. Because most of us gathered in our family around the dining table, so that's really good to read. Family meal times in a quiet area, doing a movie night with the families, consult with them more. Coming in thick and fast now. Theme nights with families over meals. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, organizing some theme nights within the care home. Other people really like the idea of the cinema movie night with the family. That's cool.
Yeah, brilliant. So lots of really good things. So yeah, so keep coming in. We'll not close the contributions just now, so you can keep typing, and Sherry will close up on the last slide.
Yeah, so I think we have overrun slightly, but only by a couple of minutes. So thanks everybody for sticking with us. Yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and especially thank you to Catherine for coming on to share her experiences, which I think everybody found, really great, and Anuj for supporting the webinar. If there are any questions, we'll try and answer them in the chat. You can also contact us via our email address, which should be up on the screen at the moment. Please also take the time to fill out the evaluation form if you have a minute, and we'll put a link to that in the chat. Haven't done it yet, but we'll do that in a minute. And we'll also send out the recording of the webinar once that's available. So thanks again, everybody, for coming, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day and rest of your week.
Yeah, so we'll get that. We'll get the evaluation forms. Lots of people are dropping out of that, so that's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Get that copied in.
And also next month we have our next webinar coming up, which will be on the human rights approach and incorporating the health and social care standards. So look out for that, and we'll keep people updated on the next webinar through our mailing list as well. So thank you everyone so much for joining.